Assalamu alaikum, everybody. How are you? We have a lot of new toys today. So a last reminder to please silence your phones. And we're so blessed, actually. Well, a couple of things. So, you know, we had the conversation with Rami Youssef, and he was so kind to have his sound guy come and send us these microphones and stuff to try and boost our sound quality. And I know a lot of people have also written before asking that we try to do a better job of getting better sound. So hopefully this will, we're experimenting with it, and hopefully it'll make a big difference. And then we got the TV screen, so for the holidays, because last time I was talking about a YouTube video that I had watched, and you know, the professor was saying, you know, it would have been really nice to be able to show it so people could see it. So I'm actually going to show you today what I was talking about before, and we figured, you know, we could be a little bit more high tech and more engaging, more interesting. So this is very exciting. This is our website. Is it, how many people have actually seen our website? Okay, good. So most everyone. Okay, great. So wonderful. Well, so this is a momentous meeting because it's our 2-year anniversary. We launched, you know, 2 years ago in December 2017. And I actually remember standing here a year ago going, I can't believe how quickly the time has passed. It's been a year. And now here we are again. I can't believe it's another, you know, now it's been 2 years. And so it's been an amazing journey. And I wanted to share a few things. First is that one of the things that we have launched is a celebration t-shirt that if you follow us on our weekly emails, this is a shirt that I was wearing before for the Rami Youssef thing. It says Usuli, and agent of change, seeker of beauty, lover of justice, example of mercy, kindness practitioner, critical thinker, spiritual elevationist, and Muslim. And so I designed these, and I'm like, someone was saying, oh, who did you get to do it? And I'm like, me. So, and someone actually on Facebook, when I shared this, was asking, you know, does Usuli mean actually all of these things? And I said, well, actually, the Usuli is the approach, and you know, the school of thought, and we embrace these attributes, and we aspire to these attributes. So if you are, you know, if you identify with being Usuli, this is what we try to achieve here in this space. So anyway, so everyone who wants a t-shirt, this is a free t-shirt, and so I, you know, have made this available, you know, on email, just to say, email me, tell me what color, what size, because it comes in black and it comes in white, and it's small, medium, large, unisex size, I assume. And right today with me, I have mostly white. I have another shipment coming in, so I'm pretty much out of black for now. But anyone can have one. Yes.
What size was that white one?
It's extra large.
These are both extra large.
Okay,
yeah, and they'll
yeah.
probably shrink. I don't know. So I have small, medium, and extra large. Yeah, you can sleep in it, or I can. And we will send it to you wherever you live on the planet. I said. So I just, you know, if anyone wants one that's watching and wants to email me, that's great. And you'll also get with your free T-shirt this nice little thank you card that I wanted to highlight. I designed it, well, if anybody follows us on Facebook, we have an Usuli Institute community, and there was a really lovely friend of ours named Farah El Sharif, who at the end of the last Halaqa had posted this picture. I guess she took the picture from the live stream, and she said, you know, as I was watching this, I realized how iconic this image is, with me speaking and the professor sitting preparing. And she said, if I were an artist, I would paint this and gift it to the Usuli Institute, but in the meantime, she just used her computer skills to make it look like artwork. And I just think it's just so beautiful that I took it, and I'm like, I'm going to use it. And it's a thank you card that just says, thank you for being a friend to the Usuli Institute as we celebrate our 2-year anniversary. May God grant us many more years to come. So it's a little like, hopefully it'll be a collector's item one day, maybe in 100 years or so. But so, anyway, so I wanted to kind of, you know, take this moment. It's really amazing that we are just like a few weeks away from a new year, but we're also a few weeks away from a new decade. And so it's kind of exciting to look back on the last, you know, 10 years and see what you've accomplished, and then think forward to, you know, what lays ahead. And certainly we live in a really challenging time right now. But for the Usuli Institute, I wanted to just share some of our journey, because you know, I'm so proud of what we've accomplished here with very limited resources. You know, 2 years ago, we really had no idea what would become of our efforts, or if they would even continue on. You know, we had like dreams to raise money to create, you know, fellowships for postdoctoral students, to, you know, host symposiums or publish research, and help young scholars and things like that. And we still hope to do that one day. We haven't had a chance, or we haven't been able to secure enough of the financial resources to do that. But inshallah, if we can continue on in this effort and more people find out about what we're doing, and they like what we're doing, hopefully we'll get there, inshallah. But so, when we started, 2 years ago, we kind of started with here in this space, and it was kind of a nice, as I had mentioned then, formalization of kind of what we were doing already day in and day out for decades upon decades, which is like teaching people, and the professor was publishing books and giving lectures, and we were helping people getting involved in legal cases. And we've kind of we continue to do that, but it's sort of ramped up a bit, and but now we were excited to create a nonprofit to sort of create a more sustainable effort and bring more people into the mix and try and share this approach. So, when people ask me, okay, what does the Usuli Institute do? I pull out my elevator speech and I say, well, actually, Usuli is sort of a school of thought, it's an approach, it's a methodology. We start with the fundamentals of Islam. We look at the Quran, we look at the Sunnah, we look at the whole Islamic intellectual tradition, and we mine all of that for the moral and ethical principles that are timeless. And then we try and take those principles and apply them to our modern day, to 2019 here in America. What does it mean to be merciful in this day and age? What does it mean to be a just person, a good Muslim? So that Islam then becomes a very vibrant part of our existence and our living, and it's not some it's not some dated. We have a young scholar with us in our midst, and so we try to start very young, and anyway, so we try to meet their needs. So he was thirsty, and we were absolutely happy to accommodate that. But anyway, so we don't see Islam as this outdated, monolithic dinosaur sort of approach where God intended to hold everyone hostage back in to the day and age when it was revealed. But that it's very much a living, vibrant way of life. And we try to really push critical thinking and ask difficult questions and encourage people to ask all kinds of questions, because we really feel that for your religion, nothing is off limits. We challenge the status quo, we call out injustices as we see it, we get death threats for all of that. But it's worth it, because we feel that this is really what is called for. And we try to be very honest and very real and we're really brave about what we're doing. So we're proud of that approach and feel it's really necessary in our time. So when we started out, back in December of 2017, we were in this space. We started out with a few halaqas that were kind of giving an assessment of where we were as Muslims and where are we in the world today, what are some of the challenges, what are some of the opportunities, what's going on with Islamophobia, because it's definitely made life a lot more difficult. And we also spent some time talking about what Usuli means and the background of that. So you can go back and find some of those old halaqas if you're interested. We were in that mode again. We were sort of not really sure where this was going to lead, and we also were trying to fundraise and get out there and tell people about what we were doing. And we discovered that people honestly were still not very interested in investing or supporting or getting behind intellectual causes. After about 6 months, we, and with the urging of our son Sharif, who had been asking the professor for about 6 years, please do a halaqa on Surah Al-Rahman, and recognizing that one of the main problems confronting Muslims is just a complete disconnect with the Quran and the Islamic tradition, the professor then started doing Quranic commentaries again, tafsir. And we had done that in the past, so we actually had already an inventory of tafsir from probably 2 decades ago, and those are also available online. But we jumped into Surah Rahman, which took us about 6 halaqas over 3 months. And it was incredible. It was just, life-changing for me personally, and so I really want to encourage people, if you haven't listened to it, please do. And if you have listened to it, it's definitely worth listening to again and again, because it was just so rich. There's just so much there. And so with that, then we decided to continue on with more tafsir. So we kind of went back to where we had left off previously and started filling in the gaps. And so we started at Surah 110 and started working our way backwards. So now today we are going to finish the second half of Surah 91, Al-Shams. But so we have covered, so we had 25 Halaqa sessions covering about 14 chapters. So that's, you know, pretty good, especially when these sessions, when we come together, we're here for probably 3 and 4 hours at a time between Q&A and everything. So that's a lot. And then from that, you know, we were, that was like about the summer of 2018, and we were fortunate. We had time, and we had, you know, some breathing space to do even like 2 halaqas a month. But then we you know, kind of ended up in the fall of 2018, and we were back in school, back to the law school, kids back in school. So everything kind of got crazy again. So we had to scale back to just the monthly halaqas. And in that time period too, if you recall, we had a program where we were trying to save manuscripts. So we, you know, this was a really exciting project because the professor spent a lot of time talking about, you know, all of these valuable manuscripts that were actually getting sold on eBay. So it's heartbreaking to go on eBay and see what portions of your tradition are getting sold off, especially when Qurans, for example, are being ripped page by page, and each page is getting sold for hundreds of dollars. So it's an emotional thing, and you know, so people really felt that, and they you know, we had a lot of very generous donors who gave money, and we were able to rescue over a dozen manuscripts. But you know, that process in itself is a little bit, you know, it's definitely painful and traumatic, and requires a lot of effort, a lot of money, a lot of people to get behind it. And given our resources, and given, you know, how things got more and more busy, that effort sort of, you know, fell to the back burner. But it's still a very, you know, important project. There are millions of manuscripts out there, you know, and people who are buying them up tend to be, you know, wealthy Saudis, Israelis, and all that kind of thing. So, you know, inshallah, maybe one day we'll be able to kind of take that up again. And in between, we were really fortunate to hold some wonderful, groundbreaking conversations where we invited people to come here and speak with Dr. Abou El Fadl or myself. And we had about 7 of those. So I just wanted to highlight them because I think they were really meaningful and really groundbreaking. And our first one was, if you recall, because some of you were here for that, was a conversation between Salam El-Mariyati, who's the head of MPAC, and Professor Khalid Beydoun, who wrote a book on Islamophobia. And one of the things that I wanted to show, they were having a conversation about CBE, which is government funding of programs. And so, you know, Professor Beydoun was very critical of organizations that were accepting money from the government for whatever their programs are, because that money comes with certain expectations and certain agendas. And MPAC had accepted some of that money. So the two of them, you know, had a lot of, I think, conflict, you know, through the written medium. And this was the first chance that we actually brought the two of them together to meet face to face and actually have a conversation. And so people, and the professor was sitting in the middle, you know, negotiating that you know, conversation. So it got very heated at times and very emotional, but we were able, you know, he was able to keep it on track. So now the thing that I wanted to say that was very beautiful, so this is the conversation that we had. You can find it online on YouTube. And I have some pictures where literally, like, they're not looking at each other and they look angry and it's like really unhappy. And then recently, I discovered this, which is they were meeting at, this was now June of this year, and they were at an MPAC banquet. And they say reconciliation is a gift from God. Now, they didn't credit us with that first meeting, so I'm going to take it. We had it here, and it was a really, I mean, it was lovely. So it's really wonderful to see that these kinds of conversations can actually bring people together, and, you know, and we had very, very good outcomes from that. Secondly, we had a conversation with Dr. Heather Laird about Muslim mental health, and we got to talk about some really, you know, taboo topics, which I think is also was really groundbreaking. Our third conversation was between me and actually Marwa, who is here. She's like our, I'm going to embarrass Marwa. She's a rising star in the fashion industry, and so we had a really lovely conversation about what it means to be a Muslim woman navigating a very, I think, difficult, you know, like New York fashion, and just the fashion industry in general, you know, is very cutthroat. And I think for Muslim women, you know, the whole issue of the symbolism of the hijab is very controversial. And so, but she's done an amazing job doing a lot of groundbreaking work. And it's beautiful because for Marwa, fashion is actually an artistry. It's not about just becoming famous. For some people it is that, but for Marwa we had a conversation about how this is really a way to express beauty in Islam and also, to portray Islam and Muslims in a very favorable light. So that's very, one of our top actually viewed conversations. Then we also had a conversation with Maryam Ramadan, the daughter of Tariq Ramadan. So that was very controversial, certainly. We invited a lot of leaders from the Muslim community to join us in this space where the professor actually talked with Maryam on a screen just like this. It was a live stream. And so we were able, because no one had heard really from the Ramadan family at that point, and we were able to ask the questions that we had in people's mind and just hear the other side of the story. And I think people are probably familiar with how controversial that topic became and how divisive. So that was a really interesting engagement. Then we had Professor Nader Hashemi come to join us here to interview the professor about his book, Reasoning with God, and we hope to bring him again. He actually wants to come and join us again for part 2 of that conversation, so hopefully that will be coming in the future. And then we also had Professor Abdullah Al-Auda, whose father, Salman Al-Auda, if you know, has been in prison in Saudi Arabia for a long time now. He's one of the most prominent scholars in the Middle East, and so we were able to have Abdullah here where we could talk about what's happening in the Middle East and political Islam and Saudi Arabia, and that was also a really deep and fascinating conversation. And just as a side note, I'm really proud to say that Nader, Professor Hashemi, Nader, and Abdullah Al-Auda will be joining us as board members for the Usuli Institute, which is really cool. So we haven't, made it official yet, but they've both agreed, and we're so honored, and we have some really exciting ideas that will come from that. And then lastly, we had the incredible conversation with comedian Rami Youssef here. It was so funny, it was so fun, it was so interesting and engaging, and it was before he took off to New York to film season 2. And we're really proud to hear recently that he was nominated for a Golden Globe Award for Best Actor in a TV comedy and I think series. I don't remember the category, but it's TV comedy. But anyway, so that was a fabulous conversation that I would encourage people to watch if they haven't already. So by the end of 2018, we also had a wonderful chance to go up to the Bay Area where the professor spoke alongside Professor Noam Chomsky and Chris Hedges, who is an incredible journalist, who's an independent journalist and doing a lot of really great work as well. And they were talking about religious nationalism and the American-Israeli-Saudi alliance. And as part of that weekend, we went all up to the Bay Area. We also held a Ask Any Question Q&A, which I love doing. We've done these several times before, where we literally bring in people and we go, okay guys, the floor is yours. Ask whatever question you have on your mind. And usually people are like, oh, they know what they want to ask, but they don't feel comfortable asking, so we try and kind of make that conversation run. But so we talked about conversion, we talked about Islamophobia and a lot of different issues. But I think that was, we tried to create those kinds of groundbreaking events so people recognize that there is a safe space where you can ask questions that you don't feel comfortable asking anywhere else. And, over the course, I want to just say, over the course of these 2 years, for me, it's been a tremendous opportunity for personal growth. Like, I have had the opportunity to come up here and speak at the beginning of every Halaqa. And this was not part of the original plan, to be quite honest. And we had our first Halaqa where I just sort of introduced what we were doing, and I was ready to just kind of like sit back and go, okay, and here's the professor. And he encouraged me at the next Halaqa to actually stand up and talk about what I felt really passionate about, which is the whole conversion experience, because I feel like, converts are such an important, part of the Islamic, experience here in America, and I feel like they play a very important role and have the potential to do a lot of good for the future of Islam moving forward, but that they're not really treated well or recognized or really understood, quite frankly. And so I wanted to try and shine some light on the conversion experience and share some stories about my own experiences and just start a conversation. You know, and you know, I always say this, but it's like, you know, at other organizations, Islamic organizations, it seems like it's, you know, much more difficult to find women who speak regularly, and certainly who speak without hijab. You know, we have people on under our YouTube videos say, "Who is this woman, and why is she speaking without a hijab?" You know, to which you know, I say, "Hey, you know, time to get an education." So. But anyway, but I really want to say that, you know, I've been so grateful, because I feel like, you know, between all of the halaqas and the conversations and the Q&As, you know, I've had the opportunity to have a place to speak my piece. I've given 30 talks, I was counting last night, and they're, you know, like, they take work to prepare, but, you know, it's like such a blessing, and I feel just so grateful that, you know, I can get up here and gripe in public about things and not get booed off, and actually say things that are meaningful, and receive some of the most beautiful communications I could ever imagine. That people are, you know, feel that they can connect with some of my experiences and relate to, you know, some of the stories that I tell. And so I just want to thank everybody for this opportunity. And, you know, I feel like, you know, we, oh, sorry, and I left out. So, you know, the thing for converts and women and minorities in particular, I mean, they play such an important role in the whole Islamic landscape. And, you know, they feature prominently in a lot of the things we talk about. But we, at the beginning of this year, in January of 2019, then we started offering virtual khutbahs. And it was a big decision to do that, because the professor had thought about it for a long time and wasn't sure if, you know, it was appropriate or right, but you know, given how difficult things had become, and also how many people were leaving the mosques because they just felt uncomfortable or dissatisfied with the quality of the khutbahs, it just felt like the time was right to do that. So we gave our first virtual khutbah January 25th, and we have not missed a Friday since. And the professor has delivered 47 khutbahs in that time period, including yesterday's. And you know, these things are amazing to me. I mean, they take a ton of work. I mean, hours upon hours to prepare. And we've talked about that before. You know, I mean, this is a weekly thing now, where the professor will go into into his den, and you know, it starts with sort of a survey of the world and taking a pulse on, okay, what's been happening, you know, what's affecting Muslims this week. And you know that every single week doesn't pass without something major happening, thanks to the, you know, very well-funded Islamophobia industry, and just, you know, all of the political, you know, movings and hatred for Islam. And so, you know, if you think about everything from the New Zealand shooting to, I mean, just, you know, the genocides, there's just so much. And, you know, so one, you survey what's happening in the world. Then the professor, you know, will go back and look at the sources, the Quran, the books, the scholars, you know, and decide what he wants to talk about in terms of, you know, reminding us about our faith, our religion, and how we as Muslims should be reacting to these kinds of things. And I think that's really so much the embodiment of what we do here, which is like you kind of start with the Quran and start with the moral teachings and the ethical teachings, and then you apply them to what's happening in the world, and sharing, you know, like what, you know, how should we feel about this? You know, what should we do about it? And, you know, and it's not okay to be silent, you know, about it. And unfortunately, there are not many, you know, scholars or organizations speaking about really horrible things that are happening. And so I'm very proud to say that we do that here, week after week after week. And, you know, the khutbahs here can often run an hour. So that's, you know, 47 hours and all the work that goes into that. It's pretty incredible. And it's our way to really fight, you know, evil and darkness, and try and shed some light and give people hope. It used to be a really big issue for me that we would go to the masjid and leave feeling in a worse mood than when we arrived. And, you know, thankfully we don't have that problem anymore. I don't have that problem anymore. And I try to encourage people to really just invest that 1 hour a week in really listening and learning, because, you know, these khutbahs are intended to give you sort of the spiritual boost and the intellectual boost, and leave you feeling better and more grounded in your faith, and more, you know, convicted in what needs to be done. And I think, you know, if that's not happening at your local mosque, here's a wonderful alternative. And it's really interesting because, you know, we sort of started this by saying, well, you know, for converts or for women who feel alienated from the mosque, here's a good alternative. But what we've also discovered is for people who are ill, for people who are home caring for children. I mean, there are a lot of people who actually, you know, like to tune in, and actually more people than not watch the recording afterwards. So, you know, it's hard to take a break if you're working, certainly for an hour-long khutbah. But we found that a lot of people really make the time to watch after the fact. And, you know, when I look at, you know, when we go to our website and I see how much we've covered and the topics, actually let me just take a moment to show you. Here on the Usuli Institute, you can find everything that we have done here. So here's khutbahs, halaqas, conversations, intros, and we have some reading things here. If you want to know what, you know, when our next events are, it's here. And this actually I wanted to share too. This I just put up. So this is a reading group in Australia that was reading Reasoning with God. If you can see, they're all holding a copy of the professor's book. And they were so happy to send us this picture and say, we love you from Australia. And, you know, because they had sent me a picture with some of them, and I said, you know, we would love to feature on the website. And they're like, can you please wait, because everyone wants to be in the picture. I'm like, sure. So it's a little bit late in coming, but, you know, so we've received a lot of really beautiful messages, and, you know, from all over the world. And people watch the khutbahs and the halaqas from all over the world. So, you know, I'm so grateful, and I pray that, you know, God will continue to allow us to do this work, and that more people will find out about what we're doing and feel, you know, excited and liberated. You know, it's been like personally transformative for me, this whole like approach to Islam, this whole experience with the Usuli Institute. So, you know, I have so much gratitude I'd like to share to everyone. So thank you very, very much. And so now for my complaint of the day. What I wanted to do is actually, so part of the reason was last week, let me go to, okay. So last talk, I was talking about like, you know, Muslim youth and how they grow up in America, you know, and I shared some stories about my thought process and what I did when I was thinking about, you know, raising my kids to know God and love Islam and Muslims. And part of that, so I started my talk by saying, you know, I became aware of this Muslim woman counselor, and she had posted on her Facebook page, which ended up on my feed, about her speaking at this Islamic, it turns out to be, it's a youth conference, and she was speaking to them about gender interactions and dating, and how at the very end of her talk, it was like 100 or so teenagers, and they were all aged between 13 and 18, how she asked if there were any questions, and nobody, oh, sorry, yeah, that was sticks. So they were asking, she was saying, if anyone has any questions to, you know, let me know, and no one raised their hands. So she said, okay, fine, you're probably embarrassed, then if you have a question, here's my cell phone number, and feel free to text me. And not expecting that she would get very much response. And by the next day, she had received over 100 text messages from, I think, almost 80 kids. And they were asking all kinds of, you know, difficult questions, everything from LGBTQ stuff to, what if I don't believe in God anymore? What if I, you know, what if I sinned and I didn't tell anybody, what do I do? You know, to, I don't know if this life is worth living, you know, to questions of hijab and so forth. And so she stayed up all night answering all of those questions, and, you know, really felt like, and then got a response back from the teenagers saying, you know, I didn't know that I didn't think you would actually respond back to me, which was just very painful because, you know, she felt like, my goodness, you know, our teenagers have these really heavy questions and they don't feel comfortable asking them. You know, why are they not asking their parents? And they're asking me, and, you know, are we failing our kids? So the comment that I had, though, was, you know, I was searching her up and looking at her speaking. And I just, back yesterday, or last Halaqa, I didn't want to comment too much about the aesthetics, but this time I do. I wanted to show you this and just say, you know, this is a typical Islamic youth conference. It was in Ohio. And let me just play it for you. So this is just the very beginning.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونشكره ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم. Alhamdulillah, I'm happy to see that we have a good number of parents here. I know it's hard on a Sunday as we're managing our schedules, prepping for the week, trying to get everything in to show up. But I think it's what we as parents need to do every day for our children, for the community, for those that have been entrusted to us, to show up. And to show up in how we raise our children, to show up in how we connect with them, to show up in how we communicate with them. In the sink are piling up, and yes, we've got a million other things in our mind, but our children must be our priority because they are the future of our deen, the future of our ummah. They are the legacy that we leave behind that inshallah will make sincere dua for us after we pass away. So as we move into those teen years, and we begin to try to understand and fathom what our children are being exposed to, we again recognize the root in that foundation. At a young age, our children might be watching, The Little Mermaid, they might be watching Sleeping Beauty and
So just to give you a flavor, I watched this and I reacted to it by I don't relate. This is very kind of foreign for me. If I brought my 14-year-old son, he would turn off. I wouldn't feel comfortable bringing, my non-Muslim friends and saying, and it goes on. I mean, I watched the whole thing and I felt like the tone of it was very patronizing in a lot of ways because she was speaking to parents here's what you do wrong and I have to convince you that you need to show up for your kids and don't you know and this da-da-da-da. And I felt very alienated, and this reminded me when I first converted and I went to my first major conference. It was Isna or Ikna or something like that. And it was just literally such a foreign experience, the separation of men and women, the overall just feeling of you better watch how you act, how you, people are ready to pounce on you, the way they talk, I just didn't get any of it. And I really feel, and this is why I wanted, to talk about, how do we think about raising our kids? And, is this something that if you see and if you showed your kids, would you feel excited? Would you feel inspired? Would you feel yes, I'm so proud to be Muslim? And I don't get that. I'm sure she's a lovely woman, so it's not any, dig on her or the content of what she said. But it just made me think, why do we do it this way? You can kind of see there's barely anybody there. And then let me just show you. Okay, so she gives a whole talk, and then afterwards she gets critiqued by, this is Imam Suraj Wahaj. It's going to take a second to load. But you see these two men are sitting and listening as she's talking, but they're not really paying attention, and they're kind of judgmental, and and then he kind of gets up. I'm not sure if this is going to load or not, but
press play.
Some darkness, and then there's some broken glass all around, and there's ditches, and then there are poisonous. Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam predicted.
Oh, okay.
sorry.
And that's what I'm going to try to do this morning, and put this into some perspective. First, let me take a moment to talk about seeing.
Oh, okay, hold on. I wanted to
Seeing moments.
Part where he says, "Brother, I'm just going to tell you right now, I have no idea how long I'm going to talk." And everyone goes, "Oh my God, oh no, where's the exit?" And then, he says, "You don't understand how wonderful what this sister has just done." And it's just, I literally within 5 seconds, I just turned off and I said, I don't think, I can't handle it. I don't know if my kids could handle it. And so I don't know why we continue to insist on doing things this way. It's a turnoff. And, and sorry if you don't agree with me, but I'm just going to, keeping it real, I just really find it unappealing and unimpressive and not at all inspiring. And, so I have to ask, who's making the decision that it has to be done this way? It's the same as it was 25 years ago when I first became Muslim. And I think we need to do better. I think we really have to do better, especially if we want our kids to be proud of being Muslim and stay Muslim. So what do we do? So we actually, I wanted to launch something new. Maybe some of you have seen this already. I launched it last night at 2:30 in the morning. But let me just give you a little bit of background. So I'm known as being a little bit insane in our family since, the professor and I were married in 1995. Very shortly thereafter, I started recording like everything he would say and do. And like whether it was a lecture, whether it was just a conversation with students, I just, I've amassed this huge inventory of audio cassette tapes, which now are just huge files of digital recordings too. But so I'm the kind of recording sort of person. So one day the professor and I were talking about our son Mido, and he was saying, he goes to a Catholic school, which I think I've told people, and so he's learning a lot about Christianity and Catholicism, the tradition, with the view of Jesus, and they go to mass and everything like that. So we were like, well, okay, we want to make sure that we're doing enough to teach Mido about our own tradition, about Islam. And the professor was like, are we doing enough? And I said, I think what might be a really fun and good idea, I was trying to think out of the box, is to do a recording where Mido actually engages with the professor, and where Mido has the chance to ask whatever question is on his mind, and then we film it. Sharif was like, "What is this, a reality TV show?"
I saw it this morning.
Yeah. So anyway,
I was surprised.
Okay, well,
It was a good surprise.
So we did it. It's called Real Talk with Mido and Baba, episode 1. And I have several, so we're going to launch more. But so this is I want to think out of the box. Okay, fine. It's easy to sit and complain about what Muslims are doing wrong, and Muslims should do this and Muslims should do that. Well, okay, but you know what? I've actually come down to the conclusion that who are these amorphous Muslims that we're talking about that are supposed to change and supposed to be better and supposed to do that? It's us. It's one person can make a difference, and we have to take that away. So, and for Mido, then we filmed it and we told him what we're doing. He was fine with it because he grew up in the age of YouTube and he's watching all this YouTube stuff. And then I was like, okay, well, let's let him edit it. So he was happy to edit it. So I'm going to play the beginning for you. So it's kind of cute.
Hello, it's me, Mido, Abou El Fadl. I'm the one on the left, son to Dr. Halaqa.
I'm the one on the left.
This is a new series on the Usuli Institute named Real Talk with Mido and Baba. Thinking this, I was around 14, early 14. Now I'm late 14. It's November 2019, late November. And yeah, so in this I just ask a few questions that were on my mind, and my dad answers them. So it should be a little interesting. So sit back, relax.
So should I just ask him a question? Ask anything you wonder about. Maybe in the future, we could, as we explore other things, and there are things that I can tell you that even if you didn't ask about, but for now, let's start just with anything you're wondering about.
Well, the question I originally thought of was, why was Muhammad decided to be the last prophet?
Why was Muhammad decided to be the last prophet?
Well, the reason Prophet Muhammad was the last prophet.
Cliffhanger. Okay, so now I'm just gonna, what's really nice I discovered last night is if you put the timestamps in here and you click on them, they'll take you right here.
Kind of going in a
Here's the next question.
direction. I know Christians believe that Jesus is the Son of God, but we don't believe that.
No.
So, if Jesus was predetermined to become a prophet, isn't that kind of a little unfair? Because he kind of had a ticket to heaven before he was born.
Well, in Islam, prophets don't get tickets to heaven. I mean, that's the thing in Islam.
Okay.
So you have to
cycle
watch
through the
it.
Is there a reason why like dates are, I don't know if they're considered the holy food, but like that they're like
Everybody
kind
join
of
it.
Dates.
standing out, like we break fast with dates. Or like things like that.
That's okay. That's a good question. Well, the real reason, you know.
We're going to be in suspense.
I know.
My other question was, oh yeah, you said like there was a debate about the first prophet, but was Adam not considered a prophet?
Well, that's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, Adam, well, in Christianity and Judaism, he's not a prophet because they actually think Adam is responsible, or Eve is responsible for the original sin. But in Islam, the idea of the original sin is not, you know, it's like, yes, Adam and Eve disobeyed God, but God forgave them, and they were not sent to earth as punishment. You know, that's...
Okay. And last bit.
No, something like
Go ahead. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I want to say something just about worship, because it's really important. If you had a friend, right, and you help this friend out, let's say with school, or you know, your friend is being bullied and you helped him out, and you keep helping your friend out time and time again. Every time, you know, he's bullied, you come and save him. Every time he needs to figure out something on the computer, you come and help him. Every time he needs something, something with his homework, you come and help him out. But then you notice that your friend doesn't really say thank you. You know, doesn't have a sense of gratitude, you know. Would you continue helping him? That's, you know, think of prayer exactly like that. Because God not just creates you, gives you that consciousness. I mean, you know, your mother and I can tell you that before you were born, you weren't around. So the fact that God gave you consciousness is a very big deal. The fact that you're aware. But then God, every single day, if you think about it, the amount of blessings, not just, you know, the fact that you don't go hungry, you have parents who love you, you have a family that cares about you, you have a home that shelters you, you have a good school. So every single day, from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, you're enjoying God's help that God keeps giving you. And prayer is a way of saying thank you. And
Okay. Did we pull you in? Okay, so we have a few more episodes that have been filmed that will be up at some point. We also, and just to give you a preview, yeah, we talked about dating. So that's pretty cool. But so, you know, we're ready to like kind of talk about more issues, and Mido is excited to do that. It's kind of interesting to watch because we've done it over several months. His hair just gets longer and longer and longer. But so we have, you know, so thank God. I mean, I think this is an interesting way. I think, you know, like adults are going to be interested to watch it. So please feel free to share it around. You know, I did some searching to see what's out there. I just typed in Muslim youth in YouTube, and a bunch of stuff came up that honestly did not look very inspiring or happy or exciting. You know, it was not something that I felt proud about, and it makes me really sad. And I think it's within all of us to figure out what we can do to contribute to making our youth more engaged and, you know, and more in love with the tradition. And it also starts with us believing that this tradition is beautiful and it has something to offer and is very vibrant and very relevant to the problems that we confront today. And we know that our kids are confronting problems that we can't even begin to imagine. So it's really important that we figure out how to address that and how to create a safe space and, you know, hopefully make a difference. So pray for us and support us. Inshallah, we'll be here in another 2 years, maybe. And also let me know if you would like a t-shirt. I have some here today that are mostly white, but and I'll get more. So, but anyway, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for your support, and inshallah, may Allah help us with this coming decade and all the challenges that are coming. So that's it. Thank you. Okay. So,
let me make just a brief comment and then we break for Salah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And then we start the tafsir.
Okay.
Did you pray Maghrib?
Not yet, so we will pray Maghrib, yeah.
Bismillah. Just a follow-up to what Grace said, and then we'll pray for Maghrib and then come back to Surah Shams. Inshallah, finish Surah Shams, and I think we can start we can start the surah that's after that. I'm not sure if we'll get through it or not, but we'll see. You know, it just struck me when Grace was talking. Islam in the United States, this has been ongoing since I've immigrated to the States in 1982. You notice that in the modern age, especially in cosmopolitan context, cosmopolitan meaning urban context, the trajectory, the orientation is for the clerical class, the class that represents the clergy, whether reverends, preachers, pastors, rabbis, is to try to shed some of the esoteric mystique and to become accessible to the laity or to the mainstream. The reason for that is partly connected to what I was talking about in last Jummah, yesterday, is that in the pre-modern world, religion is surrounded with an enormous amount of mythology, and that mythology boosts the esoteric and mystical status of religious symbols. So the clerical class, even if they don't claim to be divine or semi-divine, as in the priesthood, part of their mystique is to create barriers between them and their followers, and these barriers grant them legitimacy and authority and a certain amount of immutability. They're not quite like the rest of us, so to speak, or like other human beings. But the rise of modernity, and especially in urban contexts, and the way that knowledge transformed in the modern age, the rise of technology, the rise of communications, the spread of education, the spread of literacy, meant that religion can't function that way anymore. You're not going to go anywhere by claiming some type of methodological status to yourself and render yourself somehow inaccessible to the laity. And that's why you see in Christianity and in Judaism and in Hinduism and Buddhism, what you see in cosmopolitan context is that clergy try to find ways to talk to the layperson, to the mainstream, by being funny, by having a sense of humor, by dressing like common people, by joking with people, by mingling with the assembly, and so on. But you notice among Muslims in the West, we still insist on doing things like a woman talking and then men are sitting there that create barriers just by their look, just the way that they offer themselves to the world. And there's a sense of patriarchy because it's the imam who's going to have the last word and have the right to intervene and interject. But also then when we talk, we say things like dunya, we inject words like dunya, akhirah, iqab, hisab, or why? I mean, that's part of making religion inaccessible in a Western context. And it doesn't make sense because a lot of the times the people who use this language, instead of saying the world, they say dunya, or instead of saying the hereafter, they say akhirah. It's not even their native language. It's not because they think in Arabic and translate to English. It's to perform Islamicity. To perform Islamicity. But performing Islamicity makes us an esoteric, ghetto-like, cult-like phenomenon. If we're unable to break these barriers, and that's my main objection when Muslims, instead of competing in the mainstream, improving themselves as academics and as intellectuals by going to regular universities and going through the regular vetting process and making tenure and they create their own little boutique institutions that is an industry of pietistic performance. What results is an enormous amount of superficiality. And I don't believe that we will find our place in Western society until we're honest about talking about things like that. But because our kids, and I see this with Mido, I've seen this with Sharif when he's growing up, I've seen this with a million other kids. They come in, and the minute you start hearing all these words, like dunya and akhirah and so on, they zone out. You can see their eyes just glaze. And if they have phones, you can see them whip out their phones, and they're gone. I had an experience where I don't want to name the organization, but anyway, I mean, that same type of setting has proven so problematic that it has reached the point that now I rarely talk in Muslim context because I'm not willing to play this pietistic performance. I mean, your piety is something between you and Allah, and the audience has a right to engage you as to your product. How many subhanallahs and astaghfirullahs and alhamdulillahs and salat and taslim you can throw into your talk, it doesn't concern me. In fact, it makes me suspicious of your motives and of your authenticity. That's not what I want to hear. I want to hear substance. Offer me stuff I can engage. So that's just one quick comment because it really struck me. And in last week you talked about why you felt alienated, but I mean, it's just, well, I always say, I never know what Grace is going to talk about, so I listen to it like everyone else, and I react to it pretty much like everyone else. The second quick comment I want to make is that one of the hardest things, especially as you start nearing the age of retirement and what remains of your life is definitely much less than what you've lived and so on. One of the hardest things for a scholar is to decide what takes priority. I am fairly confident in saying I don't think I will live long enough to offer a commentary or thoughts on the entire Quran. I mean, every time I think of that, the process, and what can be said about the Quran. You know, used to have dreams of not just offering commentaries on the Quran, but also offering commentaries on some of the major works in theology and some of the major works in Islamic philosophy. I just don't think there's enough life. And can you imagine, and this is not just for me, this is for any scholar, can you imagine if we supported our scholars so that they come to a certain point in their life and basically we can buy their time from their jobs? Because this is just a little part of my life. A big part of my life is American law and international law and very technical things that, you know, a major part of my life is talking about jurisdictional issues and who has legal standing to make a filing before this court or that court, or, you know, things that just, I don't know if, you know, I used to think that by this time in my life it would materialize. I don't think, unless Allah has surprises and miracles, I don't think it's going to happen. But I really hope the next generation of scholars, that Muslims will come to a point where they realize the importance of thought and the importance of information in the age of literacy and the age of information. And that there will be enough, because I mean, can you imagine if just not, I haven't even started going into what one could have done if I could, for instance, have a set of seminars on the relationship between Aramaic versions of the Bible and Hebrew versions of the Bible. I can offer hours of classes just on that, but it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because I just don't have time. Or you offer classes on just one of the major works of philosophy by Ibn Abd al-Jabbar in the Islamic tradition, and its relationship to Greek philosophy, and its relationship to the production of Enlightenment thought, and especially the works of Thomas Aquinas. Because Thomas Aquinas engaged Muslim thinkers in ways that, and he, unlike a lot of other Christian theologians, acknowledged his debt to Muslim thinkers. He would name them. He would engage them. A lot of other Muslim theologians who read Muslim thinkers in Latin, from translations from Arabic to Latin, wouldn't acknowledge their debt. You can't talk about Maimonides without talking his being anchored fully in a Muslim context. So any effect that Maimonides had on Europe is anchored in his Muslim setting. That could be a whole set of classes. And an extremely impactful. I'm completely sympathetic, by the way. I just. By the way, can you introduce the professor, because
Oh yes,
she's a fellow academic, and I'm so happy whenever a fellow academic.
This is Professor Rose Aslan from California Lutheran University, which is out in Thousand Oaks near.
Very close to us.
And she teaches Islamic studies and
comparative religion.
comparative religion. And your son is his name?
Is Haq.
Future scholar. Inshallah.
You know, whether it's me or any other professor that spends their entire time studying things that could be relevant if rendered in language that's not penetrated with pietistic affectations. In other words, if you speak like normal people speak. How they doing the tafsir as opposed to anything else is because of the centrality of the Quran to any project that has the label Muslim. That was one. Second, it was because Sharif, for 6 years, chased after me to do a commentary on Surah Al-Rahman. And then after that, Sharif has been insisting that, no, I will finish the entire Quran before I leave this world. I can't imagine it. Just because it's really, when I speak, I just don't. You're talking about, well, anyway, people just don't realize how much intellectual product went into the Quranic text. And I am happy you brought up the manuscript thing, because my conscience keeps hurting me, and I want to go back to saving manuscripts. But again, it's sort of that very tough thing. Do you save manuscripts, or do you hire people to help you with the Usuli Institute because you need help? I'm just. Yeah, it's what you said just made me cause all types of chagrins and melancholy to come out, and there is. I was just during Grace that I had not refreshed my Aramaic for years, and just this year I decided to reread the Bible in Aramaic. So I had brought all the texts, and that's time. It's time, and I know that it's time that will not result. I'm not going to communicate it to a student, and anything that a professor learns that he does not or she does not communicate it to a student is lost. It's lost to history. When you die, it's buried with you. And then it takes centuries to produce a single intellect. All of us, every intellect that shines in a particular moment in history, that intellect, it took centuries, literally centuries, for that intellect to become what it is. And any nation in the world, you can measure the maturity of that civilization by how it preserves and perpetuates and celebrates these flowering of intellects within. And if it doesn't, these are exactly as civilizations that are ruled by generals and lieutenants. And one last thing about Islamophobia. I've said in a lot of khutbahs, and you've all heard me talk about Islamophobia. I think there will be there will be a time when historians look back at this era, and when they start writing the history of Muslims in this historical period, it will be the era of Islamophobia. Because we're not just talking about the Muslims of China and the Rohingyas and the Muslims in India and Kashmir, but we're also talking about Islamophobia being part of the consciousness of Muslim leaders in their own countries. Look at Sisi, President of Egypt, one of the most populated Muslim countries. Sisi, his understanding of Islam is that the 1.6 billion Muslims of the world are a problem for humanity unless they reform their thinking. That's Islamophobia. You generalized an entire cultural and intellectual framework upon an entire people, and you're demanding that an entire people change their way. Look at that center that was created by Trump, what's his name, the Saudi prince, MBS, Trump, and Sisi in Riyadh. that changed the religious curriculum in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, in the Emirat. Look at the discourse of the Emirati government about Islam and Muslims. It's anchored in Islamophobia. So Islamophobia is no longer a bunch of marginal quacks calling the Prophet bad names. Islamophobia has become an entire racial and colonial and imperial project, no less grand than original colonialism itself. It is neo-colonialism. And it amazes me that till now, you have a channel like Al-Hayat that broadcasts from Greece. This channel, a very well-funded channel with news anchors and news presenters, in other words, professionals, that do nothing 24 hours a day, broadcast 24 hours a day, every day of the year, but attack Islam. They don't elaborate upon Christianity. They're all Christian evangelists. They never talk about anything Christian. They never talk about the Bible. They never talk about Jesus. They never talk about anything that has to do with Christianity. All they talk about is attacking Islam. The Prophet, the Seerah, the Sunnah, the Quran, whatever. When you look up their budget, it blows your mind. It just blows your mind. There's nothing even coming close to that on the Muslim side. Not funded by a government or a non-government. And this is just one example in Greece. We're not, look it up. Look up the examples, the broadcasts from Germany, the broadcasts from Britain. I haven't even studied the broadcasts from the US, and there are many of them. The age of Islamophobia is a new colonial age. And when Muslims wake up to that, I think we might be in the process of a new historical transformation. Okay, let's pray more.